Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello, welcome to the RTÉ GAA Podcast. Hope you're all doing well. Mikey, Stafford here with Rory O'Neill as always, and we've been joined by Brendan Cummins and by Eoin Ryan of RTÉ Online. How's everybody doing?
Very good, Mike.
Right, eventful weekend, lads. Even if I think one quarter final, I think we could safely say Rory maybe didn't live up to his billing. But we'll start with the other one, Clare and Wexford, which was close. We can say that much anyway. Brendan, it was my simplistic and slightly depressed view on this one is that it was won by the benches, and Wexford, as has probably been an issue for as long as I've been a Wexford fan, 1 to 15 can probably go toe to toe with if not everyone, most, but it's 15 to 20 where Wexford have often been found wanting, I think.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt the benches were a huge part of it. And I also think that the composure that Clare showed when Lee Chin got the goal was also a big difference in the teams. They didn't seem to panic, even though they went that 5 or 6 down and the clock was ticking against them. They just kept running the ball and kept doing the process, I suppose. And that's what really, I suppose, to set them up. And also, I think when you look at the quarterfinals, all the teams obviously playing in the quarter-final section have been beaten in the championship, and their confidence is always a little bit battered. And I think we'll see a better Clare the next day, and we'll see a better Galway the next day, because they now have a good competitive win under their belts, and that'll give them the energy and confidence that you need, because players aren't robots. You know, you always have something nagging in your head. Always bet the last day, always came so close, and you want to exercise those demons, and I think certainly Clare did. And the composure, as I said, that they showed coming down the home straight. They could easily have panicked, because obviously they were favourites coming into the game. They could easily have thrown it away, but they didn't. And it's another big plus, I think, for Brian Lohan and Clare, that they have matured an extra step, that in a game that they may have lost in the past through misfortune or whatever, they actually won this time. And you're right, the bench was key in getting them across the line on top of the composure they showed. Yeah,
and Brian Lohan had to do some thinking on, didn't he? Because in fairness to Wexford in that first half, they had Clare's number. Super gluing Damien Wreck to Tony Kelly was only one element of it, but Wexford managed to stifle Clare, and people say, well, Clare were off the boil, the emotional high of the Munster final. But I think a more sympathetic way to Wexford people of saying it was that Wexford really, they didn't let Clare play. They halted their gallop until the last 15 minutes.
They did, yeah, and Clare didn't really know how to react to it in the first half, I thought. I mean, I think Clare definitely were off the boil. Like, Tony Kelly missed, what was it, 4 frees in a row? Which, you don't have a man marking you at the free. So,
if you could, Damien Wreck would have been marking him at the free if he could have. Yeah,
so we can't say it was purely, it definitely was a bit Clare not being fully at it as well. And then I think second half they started to get more control. The sucker punch of the 2 goals, but the bench, as you said, like having lads like Shanahan, Rogers, Meehan to be able to come on, all scored, all had a big impact. That really made the difference.
Yeah, no, it was serious, but also, Rory, lads who were on the pitch who maybe hadn't had much of an influence, mainly Peter Duggan, Shane O'Donnell, and the aforementioned Tony Kelly. The last 15 minutes they really came into it, and I thought O'Donnell, who had been not anonymous but like really hadn't had the impact we got used to this summer, in the last 15 minutes he couldn't be stopped. If there was a ball on the ground and there was 15 men fighting for it, was little Shane O'Donnell who was coming out with it. It was a phenomenal performance down the stretch.
Yeah, it was an odd game. The 2 games were unusual and very peculiar, and a funny atmosphere for both. But from a Clare perspective, like, I kind of felt they only really hurled with any sense of fluency for about 10 minutes, really, and just totally turned the game on its head. Now, what that does say is there's an unbelievable spirit there. They dug one out that looked very ropey at times. Were they 6 points down midway through that second half at one stage? That's, and I suppose, as you mentioned, had Wexford maybe a little bit more depth on their bench to bring it in and freshen things up. You know, who knows what might have happened after that. I think some of the big leaders did stand up. Tony Kelly kind of came into the game a little bit more for that during that period, and the bench was massive. Aaron Shanahan was a huge influence when he came on. Did he score 1-2? I think
1-2, yeah.
I think Clare would have won it anyway, even without that goal. I think they had kept their cool.
I kind of had a sense
they'd reeled them back to a point. I think they had them anyway at that stage.
I was kind of had a sense. I was thinking, Jesus, this is definitely looking like extra time here. We're in for a long one, but in fairness, look, I think Brian Lohan will have left Thurles on Saturday night absolutely thrilled. I think they couldn't be in a better position. There's loads for them to work on. The key thing for beating provincial finalists, and both of them won on Saturday, is it is difficult. Brendan mentioned it, to try and resurrect the morale within the panel after bad defeats for both of them in those provincial finals. So it would have been an easy cop-out. But I think it would have been nothing short of a disaster for Clare, given the form that they had shown on such a consistent basis right throughout the round robin and going toe-to-toe with Limerick on so many occasions. So for them now to make it to, I always feel that like making it to All-Ireland semi-finals weekend is should be the big target for all teams. It's the best weekend of the year in a hurling sense, because it's just a festival of hurling in Dublin. There's teams from 4 counties all up. It's just the only show in town.
Yeah.
And they're there now. And I think that's the big thing that they'll take out of it. They have 12 days now to prep for it. Shanahan played a club game on Sunday night, by all accounts, togged out for his club against Dalo's crowd and scored 3-3. So, look, I think his options are good. He's built a really good panel. I think their morale now will be absolutely booming once again. I suppose if there was any blot in the copybook from a Clare perspective, it's the fact that they had to take off Rory Hayes after 9 minutes. And I don't think it was an injury. I just think he just wasn't going well. And that's a big call, a big call, but I think it sets it all up really nicely now for that semi-final, especially given the fact that they're going in there against Kilkenny, who I think they haven't beaten in the championship since the Jubilee year of 1997.
Jesus.
So that's another interesting side plot.
Yeah. Brendan, who'd be a goalkeeper, huh? Of the 4 goalkeepers who lined out in Thurles.
It was a tough day for goalies, Brendan, wasn't it, Shane?
3 of them. Patrick Collins won't have been happy. Ivor Quilligan, certainly with the shot that may or may not have got a touch from Lee Chin. I don't think it did. But then obviously the most glaring one and the most costly one is certainly for where it happened. And, in the match was Mark Fanning's. And after having a couple of incidents against Westmeath as well, he didn't have a stellar season. Maybe under a high ball, but then at the same time, I think he was about Wexford's 4th highest scorer. So, he wouldn't be hanging the guy or anything like that. It was just, it wasn't, you tell me better, Brendan, it wasn't a particularly difficult one to take in. I'd say, was it an instance where he was probably thinking about what was next while he was still catching the ball?
I think in those examples, whether it's Patrick Collins one, I think he was over on the left of his left-hand post. Now, while the groundsmen and Thurles are really good, there is a slight difference in the height because the ground isn't built up when you're resodding. So therefore your hand is that bit further away from the crossbar. And if you notice, he jumped at the ball. And I think the same way with Fanning, he let his feet leave the ground. And if your feet leave the ground when there's no need, you don't have a strong base and you nearly jump over the ball to catch it, and it causes it to bounce out of your hand or to go between your finger and your thumb. And I think that's what happened. It's a concentration thing. It's a pressure thing. That's the way it is. And I think Ivor Quilligan will be the happiest of all the goalies because he got to kick up the backside and he's got a chance now, and he'll be angry and he'll be even more focused in Croke Park against Kilkenny. So it's going to take a fair shot to pass him, I think, the next day, based on the lesson they've learned. But for the other 2 lads, it's just a really, really difficult when you've dropped the clanger, and it's a very, very tough place to be. But they're mentally strong. They have a bit of time now to I suppose think about it and wait until they get back again. But who'll be a goalie? I suppose that's the bottom line, lads, isn't it?
Indeed. Eoin, so looking forward then with Clare, they have a few weeks to kind of rectify things, and they'll probably expect that key players won't play as poorly for as long again. But Kilkenny might look at that performance as well and say, Kilkenny, who are often, shall we say, criticised for being a little bit traditional in their outlook to tactics and stuff, they may look at the fact that Wexford reaped quite a lot from lumping high balls in on big men on the end of the square, and Kilkenny might say, that's a tactic that we're well able to employ, and we have the personnel to play that game.
They certainly do, yeah. It's a concern. It's a concern for Clare, and as to whether maybe Lee Chin was in the square or not, but that's another kind of argument. You could certainly see Kilkenny going down that route.
It was unusual as well, because we've been talking about them, Rory, as a kind of that full back line as kind of being quite intimidating, and it was Cleary and Hayes we would have been talking about at the start of the year, but it was Flanagan was the one that kind of came out with credit on Sunday, whereas Hayes had a poor 10 minutes and was hooked, and Conor Cleary got a tough time of it as well.
But I think it'll be a very interesting set of matchups. Eoin Cody, Billy Ryan, TJ Reid going in there against Conor Cleary, Rory Hayes and Paul Flanagan. That to me now, I think that if you weren't prepared to pay whatever the admission fee is, that is worth that's worth the fee alone. I think it's going to be really interesting just to see how they pair off against each other. And it could be Route 1 from Kilkenny. I think that would be you can't get away with just playing it one way anymore anyway. You just can't. If you become sort of one-dimensional, then you become utterly predictable, really, Brendan, and teams will suss you out fairly quickly. Would that be fair?
Yeah, it would. And I think TJ inside, if you think of the modern game, there's two inside, right? Now, if you go lumping the ball long, normally there's a guy sitting on the 45. So while that ball's in the air, the fullback bats it out, sweeps up, and then they start to wave up the pitch. So I think there's a premium on getting the ball to bounce inside in front of the full forward line. Now, when TJ's in there, you're not going to get that explosive pace out. And that's what Eoin Cody and Billy Ryan give Clare, or give Kilkenny. But I think if TJ's out around the middle, he's standing 10 yards up the pitch from John Conlon saying, you coming out here to follow me or you staying where you are? And that's the question. And TJ, I saw him against Galway. He is so cute. The very minute that Galway got on top, TJ was under the next two puck outs down in the Hill 16. They caught the two of them and he caused chaos, got fouled, puts the ball down nice and handy over the bar. And it's been the key thing for Kilkenny, that they can draw free, they can take pressure. If you're 6 points better and you're only 2 points up during the game. And that is going to be, I think, the challenge for Clare. Can they understand that you might be way better than Kilkenny, like Cork would have thought they were last year? We're going to extra time now, lads. And if Clare can keep, and that's why I liked Clare the last day, even when they went 6 down, there was no panic. We kept playing. In fairness to Brian Lohan on the line, he wasn't jumping up and down, going berserk, hitting any red buttons, flat panic buttons, and they just did their thing. And I think that will stand in a good stead against Kilkenny now.
In terms of the aerial ability, you'd have to say Eoin Cody isn't far off TJ.
He's right up there.
And he has leg as well to go to the side. He can beat you any which way. And what I like about him as well, for a fella as big as he is, Cody goes with the hand. He's a bit like Conor Whelan. The ball bounces anywhere around the knee to ankle. He's going with the hand to get primary possession to spin you. And that's very hard as a defender to try to counteract. And in Croke Park, the full back line, I'm afraid, are going to be one-on-one. You can play sweepers, whatever way you like. When it goes in deep, you're one-on-one. It's every man, woman and child for themselves then. And that's where the danger signs could be for Clare and what Kilkenny are looking to exploit.
Right, we can't ignore the kind of the one major kind of talking point out of the game, Eoin, and one reason we drafted you in is because you've become something of an expert on the hurling black card / goal scoring opportunity rule, which is now must be called the lesser spotted hurling black card and goal opportunity denied rule, because we had another chance to perhaps see it in action. And I can't remember when it was last seen in action, Owen, you might know better than me. And when Cian Nolan pulled down Lee Chin and a 21-yard free was given, but you could make the argument that he was more than 25 metres in from the sideline, which would have made it prime territory for a black card and a penalty. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I think it's maybe a dubious honour being called a black card expert. I don't think I'll get it put on a business card anyway. But I wrote a piece in May last year saying that this was not a great rule because it was so open to confusion and loopholes, and a year on, here we are. I think you could say there were probably 3 possible reasons why Colm Lyons didn't think that was a penalty. The first was whether it actually was a goal scoring opportunity or not. And there was disagreement. I think Michael Duignan on the Sunday game thought it was, but then Davy Fitz and Joe Canning thought it wasn't. So
there
fair
you
enough,
go.
you have to judge that.
Yeah.
Pure opinion. The second one is the distance thing, the 25 metres from the sideline, which came in last year after Aidan McCarthy fouled Jake Morris right on the sideline. And poor old James Owens got lambasted. So they brought that in. So the ref might have been...
We're clear on the harsh side of the decision. Is that what we're saying? Is I'm only messing, Brendan.
They just love being involved in black card talking points. So you could have had Colm deciding that was too close to the sideline, and then we had the lads last night, Liam Sheedy, Donald Logue, Ursula, suggesting that we should have lines painted on the pitch maybe for the semi-finals, which would help the rest. But to me, the bigger problem, and it's another possible reason why he didn't give it, is the fact that so few fouls are specified as being part of this rule. So pulling a lad by the arm is not enough for a penalty. The rules are it has to be either pull down an opponent, trip the opponent with the hand, arm, leg, foot, or hurl, or use the hurley, it says, not hurl, in a careless manner. So dragging a lad back is not enough for a penalty. And I thought, watching it in real time, I thought first of all that Cian Nolan had only dragged Lee Chin back. You could see on the replay then that he got his left arm in under his leg and kind of pulled him down. But if you're the ref and you're at least 20, 30 metres away, because it's hurling and the ball moves 100 miles an hour, and you don't have a replay, I don't know how you're supposed to know that. So you've got those 3 potential, reasons not to give it every time for a ref, which is probably why they're not giving them anymore. Because how can you be certain with such a vague, uncertain rule, And we had a great example of that in the last round of Munster. Tip Cork, Ronan Mara pulled back Patrick Horgan. And I was actually one of the people who was like, that's clearly a penalty. But it wasn't, because he didn't pull him down. Now then you're getting into, what's a pull down? Is it a rugby tackle where you actually drive a lad to the ground? Is it where you pull a lad back and he falls over? Does that mean a lad has to fall over to get the free? It's just way too vague. It's way too open to interpretation. For me, I would make it simply, if it stops a goal, it's a penalty, regardless of whether you meant it, regardless of where it is. It's up to the ref to make that simple call, goal scoring opportunity or not. You could maybe get rid of the black card. That could be too harsh if it's accidental, but at the moment it's a mess, and the refs are just playing it safe and not awarding it for that reason.
If you ask me, Brendan, if someone manages to pull Lee Chin down to the ground, their team should be awarded a penalty because it's a physical feat of wonder. But
I was going to say that, or maybe mine gone the other way in the bias. It should be a penalty for Clare. Lee Chin obviously dived, and they should have gone up the pitch. It's just a travesty that it wasn't given that way. But look,
you're just looking to be able to open those curtains again, Brendan. That's all. You're just trying to work your way back into the good graces.
But 400 people sit outside my back garden. It's like, they're making them tea. They're well fed. There's no problem. It's all okay. Yeah, we're sound. But yeah, it is. And in fairness to referees, I know the lads touching it the other night on the Sunday game. It is really difficult because when Lee Chin broke through there, that was a game deciding decision for all the world. Because if Wexford got another goal, then that would have put a fair hole in Clare's confidence, and it was only going to be another long way back. But lines on the pitch, that's one thing that can be done. But then is there separate rules then for the inter-county game and the club game? So, club referees, the same decisions have to be made at that stage. I just think it was really hard. And clear and obvious pull down and all that, it's just a bit too vague. Of all the rules we have in hurling, for whatever rules we have, a lot of them are vague, and we all get a sense of it really as hurling people, if that was a free or not. But certainly a drag down at a point in time that's as serious as that, especially if we're using it as deterrent in the game, which is the reason it was brought in. the rules need to be tightened up on that. There's no doubt. It needs to be clear to make it easier for refs and officials as much as anything else, because all the players obviously will play on the edge. That's just what they do, and they can, that's the way it is. But refs need to dig out, I think, from the rules side of the game just to make it clearer for them.
Yeah. Eoin spells it out pretty well there, Rory, doesn't he? And I know you get access to the ref link sometimes. Like, just the number of things that have to be assessed and adjudicated on in that split instant. There's just too many. No referee is going to make that call, barring the most. I can't even imagine the instance where it'd be that cast iron that they'll actually do it.
It's too grey, and if it's a handier decision to just award a free, bang out a yellow card, the penalised team obviously loses a point, at least 1 point as opposed to 3. And it's a nice safe option for the referees to take rather than run the gauntlet of subjectivity, which is effectively what he would have to do by trying to interpret a rule that is very, very difficult to ascertain one way or the other what the correct interpretation might be. Because as Eoin just outlined, Michael Duignan had one view of it. It comes into the studio and the panel have a different view. So, where does that leave the poor ref in that argument? So there you go.
Yeah. There shouldn't really be any room for kind of vagaries, I guess, in it.
For me, sorry, Mike. You're never going to get rid of the subjective element of someone has to decide if it was a goal chance or not. But I really think we could at least clean up the thing of the fouls. Only certain fouls, like even if it's an accidental foul, the negative effect on the attacking team is still the same. Whether I meant to knock you over or I didn't, I knocked you over, I stopped you scoring a goal. So why are we trying to differentiate between cynical and accidental when the result is the same,
Yeah, that goes back to kind of the introduction of the black card in the first place, doesn't it? And why that was brought in, and that's a can of worms for another day. Okay, let's look at the first semi-final then. Brendan, a very kind of an unusual game where Galway needed to, you used the phrase, exercise their demons earlier in relation to the provincial final losers. Galway needed to do that. I don't think they did it. I don't think Galway played very well, and I think if it wasn't for Cork missing 53% of their shots on goal, there's no way Cork should have lost this game. So Galway, I don't think, exercised those demons. Where do you stand on it?
Yeah, but sometimes if you play like that, you can spin it that maybe it's our year, lads. We played brutally bad, should have been bet, but hey, we're still in the championship and Cork aren't, so our name could be on the cup. But if they play like that against Limerick, God only knows what it'll be after 20 minutes. But you'd have to feel for Kieran Kingston, because he had let off Patrick Horgan to bring him on for the big cheer with 15-20 minutes left to finish off the game when everyone was tired, a few mistakes and all. And actually the opportunity for Patrick Horgan was in the first 35 minutes of the game with the freeze, and it just seemed to take the air out of him. I find that if you're changing your free taker in the first 20 minutes of the game, everyone else is going, oh no. And it just, everyone became paralysed then. The goals became about 5 feet wide for Cork players every time they looked in, and they just kind of just panicked. And Galway just seemed to do their thing, slowly but surely go, hey, these fellas look like they're hitting the game away. We might as well just kind of get the odd break here and there, like the goal they got, the long range ball in. And look, Henry, while I suppose looking at it in his coaching side and say, my God, we need to be way better than this, he'll say, well, do you know what? We were unbeaten all year at the Kilkenny game. We rode our luck here in this one, so no one expects anything of us now against Limerick going into the final. So it's well set up, one big game and we're in the final. So there are a few positives from it for Galway. Mostly, I suppose, the fact that their luck might be in.
Yeah, Rory, I did make the case here last week. It's just these intercounty managers have to start listening to me. I did make the case that they should perhaps think about starting Patrick Horgan for this game. I was poo-pooed on it, but I was thinking more about what he could do on the edge of the square and give the physical Galway full back line their fill of it. But actually what they needed him for was to take the frees, because Conor Lahan and Mark Coleman both just had one of those days, both of them, which is really unfortunate.
It was a bizarre, really, really bizarre game. I didn't know what to make of it. I had to watch it again. And I didn't really want to, but I did. Just
that's commitment to the cause there, Rory.
There was a few things about it, right, that stood out for me. It's very, very unusual in hurling where the better team loses. That very, very rarely happens. Now, and this isn't just with my Cork hat on, because if we remember back to the podcast last week, I actually felt that Galway were going to win. No, I didn't think they were going to win under these circumstances. I mean, if you kind of wrap it up in a very swift and quick nutshell, Cork threw one in after, 45, 50 seconds. So we're 3 points down straight away with a terrible goal conceded. Had 3 really good goal chances themselves, where an extra step or two or an extra pass and your execution, and even one of those goes in. Missed a heap of frees, hit the post twice, right, with shots, and still only lost the match by a point. It's I still can't understand it. I'd say they're waking up today and just, bamboozled. They'll be full of regret. They didn't really play well. They know that themselves. Team selection obviously is a big talking point, and whether Huggy should have started or not. Look, I think at some point, I think Patrick Horgan has plenty to offer Cork for the next few years. I'm just not entirely sure if he's going to get the most out of him for the next couple of years. 70 minutes probably isn't the right employment of his services, because you might get longer out of him in terms of his career if he can become accustomed to dealing with 25 minutes for real injections of just that extra bit of skill and a bit of craft and a bit of wizardry that he can bring. One point I will make in terms of the actual game itself. And I went out and had a walk around, and then I know, Brendan, you've been part of double headers and very interested in your views on this, right? 1:30 lunchtime on a Saturday throw-in for hurling. I don't know. I just don't know. It felt odd. Okay, that's the first thing. So the crowd was bizarrely subdued and unusually subdued, I felt, for a knockout big hurling match between 2 big counties.
Downright sober, I'd say, Rory, weren't
Yeah, well, I think there might have been an element to that. It was just, now the second thing was, obviously the crowd, you had this is all part of a double header, and everyone was saying, the double header is a great thing. And I generally would maybe go along with that, except what I did notice was you have 4 different sets of supporters all arriving at different times, and 4 different sets of supporters all leaving at different times. Some will stay, some will hang around for maybe 5 or 10 minutes of the second game. Some will be getting up and leaving before, and it isn't conducive to creating a sort of a consistent atmosphere at any one stage, because it's being pockmarked through the course of the day with people shifting in their seats. Oh, sorry, I need to get out here, or I'm leaving, or I'm coming in, I'm sitting down, all that type of stuff. And then you throw in, as I said, the fact that it was Saturday and people were only out of bed. I don't know, it just felt slightly off. And I don't know whether that fed into the nervousness around the teams, because both games, let's be honest, were not great until maybe the last 7 or 8 minutes, when the games kind of, fell into a melting pot more by chance than by design.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I
think it was more of confidence. I don't know that Conor Lehan or Coleman ran you and missed the freeze because someone was shuffling the seat trying to get in, if you know what I mean. I think that what happens is, in a group, you're built up. If it's Clare for Munster final, Cork, in fairness to them, would have been fairly buoyed in a lot of ways because they'd beaten Tipperary. And that's what surprised me the most. I mean, they were coming in on a bit of a high. They beat Waterford. They had beaten Hammer Tipperary in that same venue, right? And a 1:30 or 2 o'clock throw-in, it's either here nor there. But for me, it didn't catch fire for them like the other games. I mean, for a free taker, to stand over a ball knowing that Patrick Horgan is over on the far side, then you hit the first one wide, you get the ooh from the crowd. Then you're going up to the second one, and it's playing on your mind, you get an even bigger ooh, and then everyone's looking, going, who's taking the next one?
The ooh is a very loud ooh as well, wasn't it? Did you notice the ooh?
Kind of and then you can see, Rory, you were probably directing on the game, pan over to Patrick Horgan quick, and you see Patrick Horgan stretching, and there's a pressure builds, right? And then everyone's going, oh, do you know, should I get fouled here or not? Because, geez, the free taker's under the cut. So there was no freedom to play. And I think that's what Cork got a little bit caught up in. That flamboyant, swashbuckling play that they had. Really, the hallmark of their game against Tipperary was run the ball, move it quickly, get it to the corners, win races, foot races, all that. It just seemed to grind to a halt. And you know, and like you said, Cork were probably the better team on the day, but the team deserved to win is the one who was the most on the scoreboard, which ends up being Galway. And that's the way it is. But I think we will see an awful lot more energy from both Cork and Clare the next day. Positive energy, which is the important thing. Having won, having said we've no regrets now, lads. Think of what you felt like Monday morning when you woke up after the last game. Even though you won, you felt shiting yourselves because you didn't express yourselves properly. Let's not have regrets the next day and off you go again. So I hope it'll need to be better. It'll always need to be a lot better for both teams.
Look, I do think Brendan is absolutely spot on. I think there's Galway will come out of that with, I think, loads to work on. Will feel like they're in a great position going into the semi-final. The chances are they'll probably be largely written off. Let's be honest, they're going up against Limerick. Nobody can see anybody beating them the way they're hurling at the minute. I think that puts them into a good position. It's almost like a free shot, and I think they'll relish that. Like, I mean, they are the one team. I said this a while back, like that. I felt that Galway are one of the few teams out there that can match Limerick in a physical sense, and they'll be well able for it. One thing to note on that, actually, I don't necessarily think it was a conscious thing, or maybe it was, but was there a stricter interpretation of the rules by the referees on the weekend, Brendan? Did you think, or did just the two teams maybe not kind of get into the sort of hand-to-hand stuff that we obviously saw in the Munster final?
Yeah, I think there was a bit of that in it. I had a feeling coming up to the games it might end up being nearly like a free-taking competition, in that the refs would have been told, look, just keep a lid on this thing for as long as you can. No, I think there's always going to be a spin around in games. We have certain incidents that happen. I think they've happened, they're done. I think players are just going to get on with it. That's just the way the thing works. But back to Galway, I think if they can put Cathal Mannion inside in the full forward line with Conor Whelan, you remember they played Tipperary above in the Gaelic grounds. I think at some rotation, whatever way Henry works his forwards, if he can get Cathal Mannion and Conor Whelan inside 1-on-1 or 2v2 inside there with the Limerick full back line, I think that's the trick. That if they can get that, I think Cathal Mannion's out around the middle. His role is really, I suppose, as a playmaker, Noel McGrath type figure, spin the ball around. But I think he's doing too much chasing. He's working too much to get hooks and blocks. He's not lazy enough to do that role for all the world. But I think if he goes inside, he'd be a serious goal threat now against Limerick, himself and Whelan at some stage, to get the two of them in there in partnership for maybe 10 minutes or so every 15, 20 minutes in the game, get two spins out of him in there and see what happens. Yeah. Because he was unbelievable against Tipperary and he was in there, and I haven't seen him in there since.
Yeah, he does a lot of great work though. I mean, Mannion scored 4 points, and you remember that incredible block he made on Jack O'Connor where his hurl actually split in two. So you could see why Henry thinks he's worth bringing back out the field a bit.
You're robbing Peter to pay Paul though, aren't you, a bit? Yeah,
you need, but that's what I'm saying, you rotate him. You know, like the style of play is never locked in. Positions are never locked in either. So it would be, if he ended up in there on a 21-yard free, for example, or whatever, hit the free or the bar and stayed in there for the puck out. Do you know, that kind of a sneaky thing, rather than someone shouting, you go in there. Just that rotation. We would have done it with Tipperary with Lar Corbett. He ended up on the edge of the square by himself. Do you know, just out of the blue, guys just end up in positions around the pitch you don't expect. And I think that's what they'll need, because if they're going to beat Limerick, and remember the last time they ran Limerick fair close, right? But they didn't take the goal chances they got. The last time against Kilkenny, they didn't take the goal chances they got. And I think if Whelan, Mannion, Codcannon are inside the Kilkenny 45 with that 3, then there's enough in there, I think, to give threat, and they will need to get goals if they're to. And again, it'll add to give them a bit more fizz as well. If they can hit the back of that Limerick net early days, everybody gets filled with confidence then, and then we see a different Galway team to what we saw in Thurles.
Yeah, the one thing, Eoin, I suppose, just to finish up, that they will need to work on, and the lads touched on it there about, maybe the refs were a little bit more stringent, but despite all their travails in the first half from dead balls, Cork still scored 8 points from frees. So Galway's discipline, Aaron Gillan will be licking his lips at the thought of getting 12 scoreable free opportunities in an All-Ireland semi-final.
Yeah, and you're fouling lads when they have the better of you, when they have the legs on you. And I thought Galway looked a bit leggy compared to Cork. Now, I don't know whether that's Cork, you could say, are possibly the fastest, fittest team in hurling. Maybe they're not maybe they're lacking the power that you maybe now need to win. But definitely, I thought Galway looked a bit sluggish at times, which is a concern. And then you look at 2 games back to back where they haven't played that well. Okay, they won at the weekend and they won by a point, and there were bright spots like Cathal Mannion, Conor Whelan, and twice I think they kind of Cork almost got level and they put kind of 3 points together in a row. So that's great. But if I was a Galway fan, I'd be wondering, did we peak in Salt Hill against Kilkenny? You know, a touch of the Waterfords, you know, did you maybe reach your potential too early? But who knows? Maybe they'll get great confidence from the manner of the win.
The one thing though, they like if you even go back, I know we're kind of looking back in the league now, with obviously, I would almost suggest a level of disdain. But there was one particular game where it was kind of a sense that, look, you felt the two teams kind of went at it, which was Galway Limerick in the Gaelic grounds. And Galway came up to, no, look, we know the Limerick were, you know, in the very early stages of their preparations, but I think they will certainly rise to the challenge of taking Limerick on in a way that maybe a lot of other teams might wilt at the prospect. And I think they won't be one bit daunted by, you know, I think they'll actually embrace it. Would you think?
They might prefer to play the power game rather than the pace game, certainly.
Yeah, I think they will. And yeah, like, I mean, there's no doubt Conor Whelan staying close to the goals has made a big difference to Galway. And he needs only to spin onto 1 or 2 balls, and we saw what he's capable of doing. So he's always going to keep the Limerick defence, I suppose, on their toes. But on any given day, even when I played against Galway, you'd say, they're not going great, but geez, they'd have enough to beat us maybe today if they got buzzed up. And I think that's what Henry will be hoping, that X factor that can be in Galway hurling every so often, that if they can find that, they'll give Limerick enough of it. But just wonder, can they find it? Because form, I suppose, and energy levels in the last 2 outings haven't really been where those players would want them to be. So it's how they fix that in the coming weeks is going to be the key puzzle for them to fix.
It wouldn't be an All Ireland semi-final fixtures if there wasn't an enigmatic Galway team who we didn't know what was going to happen with them. Just before we finish up, I was wondering, Brendan, obviously the sad news over the weekend of Damien Casey's death in Spain. I was wondering, did you have many dealings with him? Because obviously he would be kind of renowned as Tyrone's greatest living hurler, if not greatest ever hurler, and that's obviously, like, it's shook the community up there because he was a bit of an icon to what is not an insignificant hurling community in Tyrone. That's overshadowed by the footballers, but they take their hurling very seriously up there.
Yeah, they have, and condolences obviously to the family. You know, it's a big shock when we heard the news. No, I hadn't known him, but I'd known him from afar and respected what he was doing and what he'd done for Tyrone hurling. It's just so sad, like. And I think when we're all talking about hurling and maybe for players, even I say it sometimes to teams I've been dealing with in the past, you know, this game means the world to us, right? Yes, of course it does. But it's not the end of the world if we lose at the end of it all. Just go out and express yourself, you know, and that's the way it is, because you see these sad things happening, and it just brings all of our lives into a bit of perspective and makes us, I suppose, try to enjoy the time we have a little bit more while we have it. Yeah,
absolutely. Wise words. Okay, we'll be back in a moment to discuss the Tailteann Cup semi-finals with Paul Fitzpatrick and Kevin McStay. So let's talk to you in a second.
He hits it, it's over the bar! Oh, holy Moses!
Welcome back. We've been joined by Kevin McStay. Paul Fitzpatrick of the Anglo-Celt is with us as well to talk about the Tailteann Cup semi-finals. How are we doing, lads?
Hello, Mikey.
Good, Mikey.
Good stuff. We were just discussing off air. Rory mentioned the bigger game being Westmeath and Offaly, which might have been some people's preconception. I wouldn't think it would have been yours, Paul. But Cavan Sligo turned out to be a very entertaining game, and you would probably have preferred if it wasn't quite such a close thing, because to me, the whole way through, it seemed to me that Cavan were way more than 3 points better than Sligo, but Sligo just kind of clung on there, didn't they?
Yeah, I think first of all, Sligo played very well, and talking to some of the Sligo guys in the press box, they seem to think that was a really good performance from Sligo, so I think they deserved a lot of credit. Talking to Cavan supporters since the general sense, Mikey, is that Cavan played poorly, very sloppy, particularly defensively, and I would agree with that. Like in the first 10 minutes, Cavan were 6 points to no score up and looked like they were going to run away with it. Looked like they were levels above Sligo. Sligo get a penalty, which was probably a little bit dodgy. The initial contact, I think, was outside the area, but in fairness, they went on and had 2 cleared off the line and hit the crossbar, so they probably did deserve that bit of a break. That brought them back into it. And Cavan had a big goal chance from Groden McKiernan just before half time. If they scored that, could have been a different game. But I was impressed with Sligo. A lot of pace in the team. Their wing back, he's a former AFL player, name escapes me. He was really good. He won the penalty. Thought Carabine up front was very lively, and Niall Murphy came on at half time, scored 4 points from play, and we had to move our all-star fullback Pádraig Faulkner off him, so that'll tell you how good Niall Murphy was when he came on. So I was very impressed with Sligo, I have to say. Yeah,
Kev, it's an example of how a team can improve if they get a run of games at the right time of the year, because Sligo were inconsistent, I suppose, during the league, but they've kind of come good, and like they really did. They showed a lot of efficiency in some ways in their attack. Kind of to get to wring the most out of a few chances in the first half, and they just look like a cohesive team who have been well coached and well managed, which I guess is the aim here. As much as the aim is to win the Tailteann Cup, the aim for all these teams is to be able to be more cohesive and be more of a team.
I think all the teams left in it at the weekend, the 4, would absolutely, in the way they embraced the competition, and fair play to them, would have seen it. They embraced it for one reason. I don't think necessarily to win it. That's the bonus. The embracing it was to further develop. That's what the whole thing was. I think yesterday was Sligo's 5th championship game in the season, and like that's just unheard of, really. Bar they had a qualifier run, in the noughties at one stage. Other than
2002, so that's 20 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years ago. Like so, from that point of view, you see the benefits of getting these extra games, the cohesion, the teamwork, etc. And yet, for all that, I agree with Paul. The first quarter looked like Sligo were completely spooked by the Croke Park, or perhaps the extra experience of Cavan up in Croke Park, because their efforts at trying to get shots off, and there were very, what I'd call, lower level blocks going on and shots into goalies' hands, like it was stuff now you wouldn't associate with a big competition up in Croke Park. And I was thinking, oh God, they're going to get a hockey, and if Cavan had got the chances, if they put them away. You mentioned one Garage McKiernan one there, Paul. There was another one in the second half that he should really have walked around the goalie, and there was a third one now that just escapes me. A really good opportunity.
Yeah, Thomas Galligan, I think, Kevin.
Yeah. Yes, it was. Yeah, the Sligo keeper did extremely well. So it could have turned out very smelly indeed for Sligo, but fair play to them. After the first quarter, they came thundering back into it, and even though the penalty was, it was outside. That's just the reality of it. It's sometimes, but they deserve that penalty. Look, I think we're all agreed they deserve the penalty, and they got it. They got the little break there, and that really made a match of it. Really, very, very well struck penalty. What was the situation with Niall Murphy? I didn't pick that up on the commentary. Now I was tipping in and out of it, so I didn't get. Why didn't he start, or do we know?
From what I hear, he was carrying a niggle or in some sort of a knock.
Yeah, because he was dangerous. Even though he looked a little bit rusty, he was still very, very dangerous.
And 4 points from play in the second half alone.
Yeah. And the Carabine lad that Paul mentioned, I thought he was possibly man of the match. I thought he was terrific all afternoon. It was a very good game of football, and completely stole the show from the so-called bigger game that was to follow. But it's kind of, the competition has really gone the way we kind of thought it would. Cavan, probably Westmeath in the final. We thought there might be something out of Tip. There wasn't. I think that it's followed it, and Cavan have really embraced it in terms of getting a few younger players out on the field again. He had a good under-20s effort this year, Paul, is my recollection. I mean, we lost maybe a semi-final that he could have won possibly.
Yeah, they were beaten by a point in the Ulster final against Tyrone.
Ulster final, sorry.
Game they should have won. Cavan find it very difficult to beat Tyrone anyway in anything.
Yeah.
That was a game we should have won, and Tyrone went on, obviously, and won the All-Ireland. I think we should mention the Sligo fullback as well, Enda Lyons. He was absolutely brilliant. He marked Paddy Lynch. I was really impressed with him. On the Cavan team, I thought Jerry Smith had an absolutely brilliant game as well. And Jason McLaughlin, who's sort of an unsung hero, although he's entering sort of Dennis Irwin territory now, where he's so unsung that he's oversung, but he had a brilliant game as well. He's Shannon Gale's clubman. But yeah, some of those under-20s have come into the panel, Kevin. Yeah. Niall Carlin would be one, who is a grandson of the last surviving All-Ireland winner from Cavan, Paddy Carlin. And Niall's uncle, Ronan, would have won an Ulster medal with Cavan.
Yeah, I remember Ronan, fine player, yeah.
So,
we were here last week previewing the matches, Paul, and Wexford goalkeeper Shane Roach was on, and we were kind of asking him, because they come up against 3 of the teams in the semi-finals, and he was saying Sligo very good, very young, very pacey, but he said they went up to play Cavan the next week. It was just a completely different game, like just kind of in terms of conditioning, strength, overall coaching. And I think while Sligo made a very good fist fight, I think kind of on the kickouts is where that was kind of apparent. It did seem like a higher level team playing against. I think Cavan took 5 of Sligo's 7 long kickouts or something like that. That was the one area where Cavan seemed to be able to show a kind of perhaps a physical and also a tactical domination over Sligo, I think.
Well, Cavan spent years. We had this social media motto, which I'm always talking about, called "The Future is Blue." So Cavan won 4 Ulster under 21s in a row, and all the Cavan supporters, who are famously fervent, as we know, they were all talking about "the future is blue." It was a hashtag going around on Twitter and everything else. And we actually fell into a trap for a good few years of always looking to next year, and that was a feature kind of when Terry Hyland was the manager of the team as well. That we always felt, oh, this team is coming and this team is coming, and they never actually arrived. And it didn't happen until 2020, and it's reached a stage now where I think Cavan supporters have finally realised, well, this team is here now. Because if you look through the average appearances on the Cavan team, it's actually incredible. I reckon they're one of the most seasoned teams in the country at the minute. Like Killian Clark made his 100th appearance yesterday. Grove McKernan's up in the 130s. Martin Riley's 160 yesterday. And that's right through the team. Ray McGalligan is, I think, on something like 98. Pádraig Faulkner's in the high 80s. Kieran Brady, same, and he's only coming back from a cruise ship, so he missed a year. And that's right through. I could name almost all of those guys. So it's a very seasoned, physically strong Cavan team. They employed a guy called Andre Quinn a couple of years ago as a full-time athletic development role, and he's coming from a rugby league background. Very well, I think every strength and conditioning coach is highly rated, but this guy is highly rated, and he did a great job with them. He's done a great job with them. And I know Cavan have been very successful in the challenge game, Sarah. Kevin, you'd know more than me about what that is actually worth, but Cavan beat Kildare comfortably. I think they did a bit of a number on Mayo in a challenge game before Mayo played Monaghan, and they beat Cork down in Cork as well in a challenge before the start of the Ulster Championship. And just talking to some of the Cavan lads, I think some of the opposition camps were taken aback by the physical power of Cavan, because right through the team, from Faulkner, Clark, Galligan, McKernan, this new player we have, Conor Brady. Well, he's not that new, but he's young. Conor Brady, a wing back, he's an absolute beast.
He's a good lad, yeah.
Yeah, you've got Paddy Lynch there as well. So it's physically probably the strongest Cavan team I have seen. For years we were always complaining that we were too small, but they are very seasoned at this stage.
Yeah. That was my big fear. It's interesting as you talk about the 3 matches now on the challenge tour to get ready for the Tailteann. That was my great fear, was that the boards would, let's start squeezing in midweek league matches up in Cavan or up in Westmeath, and wouldn't be sanctioning challenge games, and the sort of prep that you need to give a good account of yourself in Croke Park just wouldn't be there. But I'm happy to say that I was wrong on that front, and the narrative, certainly the background music is quite excellent on it, and a big part of it, I think, has to go to the managers of the respective, and not just the 4, in general. All the managers embraced the idea, because without their input, it's dead. That's, when you come back on the Tuesday, and if the manager is loping around the place with a long face on him, well, it's all over now. But if he comes in bouncing and selling it and, saying, we can develop, and, this gets us ready for Division 3 or Division 2 next year, and, and the momentum and getting to know guys and the way they play and the bit of camaraderie and all that. So it's all been good. that doesn't mean now, maybe we review the Tailteann, but maybe just in case we don't get there, I should throw in that the geographical divide was nonsense. There was no requirement for it at all. It worked out okay, actually, but it was never based on anything other than, you know, the price of petrol or something. I don't know what it was based on. But and the fact that it now looks like it's going to be in a full house, isn't it? It's going to be a full house the day of the semi-final and the Tailteann Cup final. That's worked out lovely because of the way the draw has gone and the new faces on the block in the senior championship, if we like. But of course, you know, Mikey, I've argued all season that it should have been the All-Ireland curtain raiser. But I'm happy to say it's been a really good success. But it can be built on and it can be definitely improved upon.
Yeah. Rory, the coverage yesterday, you're in the strange position today of waking up to maybe majority positive messages, which won't suit you. But
what's the saying? Walk easy when the cup is full, is it?
Yeah. A pat in the back is only a few inches from a kick in the arse. What you did was kind of you took players who had played in it this year and managers and introduced them as your co-coms and your panelists, and then it's nice to hear Grove McKiernan after the match then as well, Rory, saying, you know, it's great to see the fans travelling up here for an All-Ireland semi-final. He didn't call it the Tailteann Cup semi-final, he called it an All-Ireland semi-final, so the crowd wasn't huge, and obviously you switched the cameras around. It was bigger
than I thought it was going to be, by the way.
And it was compressed into one stand, which was a good idea. So how did you assess it kind of from as a spectacle, Rory, on a TV point of view, but also as just an attendee of a lot of matches?
I think it was a huge success from top to bottom, start to finish. I think Kevin's point about the geographical divide is well made, because at one point yesterday, when Cavan were 6 points to no score in front, I was kind of almost mooting a potential conversation with Damien Lawler, who was presenting yesterday. Like, is this geographical divide, after mitigating against maybe the 4 best teams getting to the semi-final to a certain extent, given the fact that maybe you could throw in the argument that Fermanagh or Down or, you know, teams, we'll say further up the country might have been better served to give us a more competitive game. But then as we saw what happened, Sligo just managed to kind of settle into the game. I think there was definitely, I think I'd agree with Kevin, I think there was an element of them feeling slightly overawed to begin with, and there might have been a bit of nervousness in their play. But jeez, I thought they played really, really well. And that's not to say it in a patronizing way. I think there's a lot of athleticism in that team. They've got some really good players. I think the key thing for me with both games, and I'd be interested in everybody's view here, there seems to be a kind of a joie de vivre around the approach to this. Like, there isn't the same level of cynicism. There isn't the same level of, let's sit in and be defensive. Let's not take any chances. Let's play with fear. I think because it's a competition that maybe is devoid of the kind of pressures that you would normally associate with the latter ends of the Sam Maguire, I think people have just decided, you know what, let's go in and have a cut here. And it's making for fantastic football, really good spectacles in that the games are end to end. Now, like, you know, the Elikadus and the Anoraks, and they might say, oh, that's not real football. And there might be a kind of a fizzy pop nature to it. But look, I'll take fizzy pop any day of the week, you know, as opposed to the alternative. So I think it was a big success overall, and I think huge credit to all the teams involved.
What do you think, Paul? I would put the kind of the quality of the footballer kind of down to the fact that the teams were quite evenly matched, and that no team has to kind of guard against being, you know, Dublined or carried into oblivion. But is there more to it than that? Do you think the teams because you would watch more, I would say, Division 4 football than most, or Division 3 in the last couple of years. Do you think there is kind of a change in style in the lower tiers?
I don't know. I think the standard of Division 4 this year, obviously Cavan as High Kings of Ulster and one of the aristocrats of the game, we wouldn't be used to playing in Division 4. But I was actually impressed with the standard of some of the teams in Division 4 this year, having covered all the Cavan games, particularly London over there. Like, Cavan were lucky to hold on to beat London by a point over there. I thought they were very impressive. Waterford were poor in the final game, but it was sort of a dead rubber for them. Wexford as well were missing a good few bodies when they played that day. But overall, I thought Tipperary were very good. I actually thought the standard wasn't that bad. Now, I was a little bit sceptical of the Tailteann Cup, or quite sceptical of the Tailteann Cup at the start. because I thought that I don't know, has the association explored every possible way of leveling things up other than just going with a separate tier? Like, we know that the biggest denominator in breakthrough senior success is prior underage success, and that it's almost impossible to find an exception to that. Monaghan in 2013 were possibly an exception to that, but almost any team who comes with a breakthrough win at senior has won at underage before. And I know you'll often hear cited how Leitrim won a B All Ireland before their breakthrough in '94, but they had also won an under 21 Connacht just before that. And if you look at that B All Ireland they won, I think they only won 2 games in that, and they won it very easily. I would say that under 21 Connacht was just a bigger thing. So I was sceptical from that point of view, that some of the things that was sort of being promised that the Tailteann was going to do, I was wondering, will it do that? But I have to say I've been sort of won over by it. And one of the things that won me over was, if I had to distill it to one moment, Cavan played down in the first round in Breffni Park. Ray McGadigan saved a penalty from Darragh Egan, and the referee made him retake it. And the place was up in arms, as you can imagine, in Breffni. And he saved it the second time. The second time was an even better save. And then there was bodies diving in everywhere to try and get this ball clear. And some Cavan fella got his hands on it. And just at that, the halftime whistle blew. And they were all fist pumping. The crowd were on their feet. And at that moment, I thought, well, okay, I'm a Tailteann Cup skeptic, but this may as well be Ulster Championship here. There's nobody feeling it any less. So I think from that point of view, yeah, it's good. But as someone who was against the tiered idea, I actually think that we need 3 tiers now, because if we are to go with a tiered approach, realistically, there's 7 or 8 teams in the Tailteann Cup who have never come next or near Division 2 football. They've been in Division 4 for a long time. Carlow and Leitrim would say got out of it for 1 year and ended up back in it. And I think they're going to find it difficult, those teams. And a lot of them are in counties where hurling is stronger, for example. I think they're going to find it very difficult.
But at the other end, Paul, like, is there any point in us talking about Meath winning a senior All Ireland either? Whereas if you talk about them winning an intermediate All Ireland, then Meath, I just pick off the top of my head, there's 15 counties in the rump of the championship who aren't going to win a senior All Ireland in the next 10 years. So the argument, they could be competing for an intermediate All Ireland instead, or an All Ireland 2, or whatever you want to call it. Kev, what do you think? Are we running now? We've gone from 1 tier to 2, and now we want 3.
Well, I do think the Tailteann was also seen as a little bit of a teaser, as in let's get this one done.
Canary down the coal mine, see what happens.
Let's see what we can learn from it, and maybe, like, we think that even the new system we're going to see next year, the groups of 4, is probably a first step to open championships down the road. I think likewise with the Tailteann, Paul is right in that there is clearly a requirement for 3 tiers, in my view as well. I agree with him. But how you would get there in the short term might be a bit trickier. What was interesting was some of the feedback yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. The panel might have discussed the idea of the round robin, and that didn't immediately take off either. Was it Mickey Quinn was saying maybe down on the sideline, it was good to have the games week on week and knockout and moving it on. And
they're being fed all these lines by their editor there. He's Mr. Anti-round robin there.
We did have a discussion about that beforehand. We did.
By the way, I should say to the editor, when you were talking there about the great success of yesterday, and one day you're on top, the other way there's one down here, Rory. One day the peacock, the next day the feather duster.
Listen, no.
So be core.
We take all that with a pinch of salt.
No. In an overall sense, I think it is a first. I think it is a first step, and surely there's a lessons learned department at this stage. I've been writing about that for a good number of years. There must be a lessons learned department somewhere in the bowels of Croke Park that look at these things logically and coldly and properly in the winter months and see what the learnings are, to use that.
I know, Kev, take it easy. That sounds all very logical.
Yeah. So I think the what's the word? What's the phrase? I'm looking. We've crossed the Rubicon about another tier. It is now accepted. It's done. It's launched. It floated. Great. And there are improvements to it. And one of those improvements is what I think Paul is edging towards, somewhere down the road. Like it can't be just Liam McCarthy and Christy Ring. There's Nicky Rackards and there's other bits and pieces that we have to. But I think 3 would do the football just about nicely. And I think it could be I don't know, there could be a 12 somewhere there. I don't know, or a 10, maybe 10, a 10 and two 12s, whatever the numbers is. That's not great maths. No, it is actually two 10s and a 12 or something like that.
You're all right. Yeah, we'll get Kilkenny back involved for the crack.
Well, don't put me down that road now.
But we better mention the second game. Rory, Westmeath, whatever. Now Offaly weren't great, but whatever way you slice it, Westmeath scored 319 from play. That's pretty impressive.
Unbelievable. I think Johnny Bradley, who does stats for us, had an incredible one there where they had 49 attacks and 40 shots. I don't think I've ever seen that. It was astonishing. Like 49 attacks and 40 shots. It was just incredible.
That's the sorry, Rory, for cutting across.
No problem.
To give you a little bit of background on that, because I follow that stat very carefully with Johnny week on week, and it's what we call the ASS attacks, shots, scores, and it's a fantastic metric. But the rule of thumb, Johnny and I over the months and years have, like, if you're doubling of that quality, it's 40, 30, 20. So 40 attacks, 30 shots, 20 scores. And if you do that, you just about win any game you ever play. And to see yesterday's one, exactly, you got it there in one. 49 is astronomical. And that's an attack. That's more than an attack every minute. Sorry, that's almost 2 attacks.
Yeah, 49, 40, 25. It's pretty impressive.
Oh, well, you won't be bet, but that.
And they're good. Look, Westmeath there. I think, I know, I don't want to be too dismissive of the second game, because look, it did peter out as a contest more or less by half time. But I think that's just to give credit to Westmeath. I think they're a very, very good side. They're very well coached. They're just unlucky, I suppose, to a certain extent, that they're in a sort of an institutionalized province where everybody is under the auspice of Dublin, but they're like, I think it's going to make for an excellent final. I think they'll be extremely well matched. And they have some serious, like, they have an awful lot of physical power in the team. They've got, like, that Luke Loughlin looks like a fantastic player. Heslin obviously rolled back the years again yesterday, gave an absolute tour de force in terms of spraying ball, kicking points from play, kicking frees, got a couple of good goals, might have got a couple of more. Sam McCartan, wing forward, top class. They've got another chap that kind of came in late into the team, Sam Duncan's excellent wing back as well. So I think all in all, Westmeath, I think the team, you mentioned at the top that this competition is being depicted as a sort of a development competition. And I think the two teams that we expected in the final made it. But at the same time, I think both of those teams now will go into that final and will really go for it. And I think whenever they hang up their boots, for the interminable time that people will be hanging up their boots, but we won't go there, right? I think they'll face into 2023 on a much better footing and really be in a good position to kind of get out of Division 3, because they'll be finishing up the 2022 campaign on a real high.
Yeah, I have to adjudicate on something there, Rory. He said John Heslin rolled back the years. He's 30 in a week. He's surely not in roll back the years territory yet.
No, McNamee isn't rolled back the years. Can I say, in defence of Offaly, just a very quick line?
They had a virus and they lost a big leader. Yeah,
the loss of Nile Derby was mega for them during the week. I'd say put an awful cloud on the whole prep, because he's at an age where it's going to be very difficult to recover from. It looks like it's ACL. And he is one of, if not their top performer. Like, he's a marvelous footballer, and it was just such a pity that, playing a competition they were well committed to in training. I believe Tuesday night he got clipped, so that's just one of the most unfortunate things of it. So that's a little bit of mitigation, but Westmeath well ahead of them.
Paul, you probably didn't watch much of this game, because I imagine you were in the bowels of Croke Park chasing players for quotes, which is the want of every respectable journalist on match day. But you did have a good stat. I just wanted to throw it in there, apropos nothing, that Cavan had 11 scores in the first half and 11 different scorers, which is quite phenomenal. So look, there's scores all over this Cavan team. We've ascertained 319 from play. There's scores all over this Westmeath team. The crowd at the All-Ireland semi-final could be treated to an absolute shootout here with any luck.
Yeah, I think so. The only thing is, knowing Mickey Graham, I imagine he's going to shore up that defence, because Cavan have been leaking too many opportunities. Got away with it really against Sligo. Like, I don't know how Cavan only conceded 114 in that game. I have no idea, because Sligo had 2 cleared off the line. They hit the upright twice. They hit the crossbar once and kicked a succession of bad wides as well. So they were getting in very easily. And I'd imagine Mickey Graham won't stand for that in the final. Conor Moyna has been injured at the minute. He generally plays a sweeper role for Cavan. Like, Cavan are essentially going man for man in this competition. As the lads were touching on earlier, like, it's freewheeling type stuff. I think we'll see it clamp down on a little bit in the final. Just before we move on,
that's showing the Tailteann Cup utter respect, then, isn't it? Mickey Graham's he's going to come and spoil the final to make sure he wins it. That shows it's taken seriously.
Four sweepers.
Yeah. The fella whose name I couldn't remember earlier, it was Luke Towie. That's the wing back for Sligo, and he was brilliant.
The storming match he had.
He was, yeah. There's great speed in that Sligo team, which is Pat Spillan's son. Pat was he showed that as well. He's very athletic and great at coming off the shoulder. He was the first game.
The Campese step.
he did
I don't
indeed.
think Pat didn't have that, did he? I think that was one of. I don't recall.
Is that how he ended up with the 2 knee braces? Maybe.
Yeah. He might have tried it one day.
He tried it once.
Pat's one was. No, look, I could be wrong, but I think Pat's one was the dummy solo.
He was, yeah. Doesn't Pat claim to have invented the dummy solo?
Well, I don't think I ever saw anybody do the dummy solo before Pat Spillane. No, there may be. I mean, look, I wasn't watching football in the 60s.
I'd say Tony McTague bet him to it.
Did he?
You probably wouldn't remember that far back now. But
no.
Pat
will be short. Next time he's on here, he'll correct us anyway. He was telling Joe Canning to count his All-Ireland medals last week, so he's feeling pretty spiky at the moment.
Pat's dummy was pretend to go left.
All right, I think we're disintegrating here, so we might leave it at that. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Paul, and thank you earlier to Eoin and Brendan Cummins. And we'll be back on Thursday to look ahead to the All-Ireland quarterfinals. Thank you very much. Good luck.
From this, how much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.